Hi everyone, welcome to JOANTalks, and I'm your host, Joan Liu. My goal for this podcast is to focus on putting together the knowledge and science relating to your health, fitness, and nutrition that is easily understood and accessible by everyone. Without further delay, this is today's episode. Hi, welcome back. This is the second of the two-part series of what we may not but should know about protein. In this episode, we will revisit the concept of nitrogen balance, protein sources, and how do we apply the knowledge to our diets. We have looked at the origin of RDA, and that is the recommended dietary allowance, and it was to evaluate protein needs in the field of animal science in the early 1900s, basically for farmers who wanted to know how to get animals to grow at its best. They developed protein quality scores and similar things like that to track how much growth for what they fed the animals. They looked at how much nitrogen was deposited for the amount that was fed, hence the concept of nitrogen retention, and that is what we call the nitrogen balance. All of the concepts were developed for growth, where nitrogen balance was positive, and you can measure that change over time. Right, so now for us humans, we measure the nitrogen that we are eating, which we can do so pretty well, but we also have to measure all the nitrogens we are losing, which we can be very bad at. And we can then determine what the nitrogen balance is. But how do we measure? Now let's start with the front end. How much nitrogen is eaten in the food? We take a bunch of food and do a chemical analysis to measure the nitrogen and multiply by a factor of 6.25. And that is based on an assumption that any protein contains 16% nitrogen, which in fact isn't always true. So in this approach, we are in fact measuring nitrogen, not really the protein itself, because nitrogen is also in nucleic acids. That means we can be measuring nitrogen in anything and calling it protein. Clearly, there is some error here in the front end. Now then, on the back end, we are trying to measure the losses. So the primary loss of nitrogen in the body firstly is in the urine as urea. Okay, so that's pretty easy to measure. We can collect that. Second, it would be the stool. Then followed by things like sweat, skin loss, hair loss, respiratory nitrogen ammonia in the breath, and so forth. And those are all very vague. Anyone who knows about nitrogen balance will say that it underestimates requirements, simply because it's easier to measure the sum of the ins than the sum of the outs. And we do significantly underestimate the outs. Next, let's look at the protein sources. If we are looking at animal sources of protein, whether it's meat, eggs, or milk, basically all of the amino acids that a human needs are in those. So be it a cow, a pig, chicken, a fish, muscle protein is still muscle protein. And all the amino acids found in meats are in the right balance. So we have basically the same amino acids, the same protein. Just that every protein has a little different balance of essential amino acids. On the other hand, dairy proteins from your dairy products such as milk, yogurt, cheese are something we can fractionate because they are all water soluble. With animal proteins and most isolated proteins, even soy protein isolate, the digestion and absorption is pretty close to 100%. And the digestion and absorption is usually 95% or higher for all animal protein. Then, for plant protein, it is less. It may only be around 60 to 70% available because we can't digest the fiber proteins attached to it. You need to realize that, as I mentioned in the first episode, that the protein is there in a plant for the purpose of the plant and is attached to the fibers of the plant. And fibers are structures. So plants have proteins attached to leaves and stems and roots and flowers and seeds. So that explains why we can only absorb 60 to 70% of the protein because we can't digest the fiber. We can also determine that whey protein isolate is 20% better than soy protein isolate on the basis of its essential amino acid. Or we can compare a wheat protein from wheat bran and to know that only 40% is available. For example, the wheat bran on the cereal box states that it uses wheat flour and there's 4 grams of protein per serving. So we should bear in mind that there would be potentially less than 2 grams of protein that we can actually absorb from this food. This makes it quite hard for us to compare different types of food and also hard for us to build a meal in that way. But what's important for us to remember is to recognize that whether you are 16 years old or you're 65 years old, your body needs to make new protein each and every day because every tissue in the body is turning over. Some can be fast, such as your liver, where you can replace liver enzymes every hour. But for our muscle protein, the half-life can be around 15 to 16 days. And for collagen, it can take months or even years, which is why if you hurt your knee, it takes much longer to repair than you have a sore muscle. So basically, the body replaces literally every protein in it about 4 times a year, and that's a pretty remarkable number. So make sure you have enough protein. Also, there is a lot of recycling going on in our bodies. And that means for every new protein that's getting made in the body, about 6 out of 7 amino acids are getting recycled. This feeds into the process of protein synthesis and protein turnover. We also know that as we get older, the efficiency of protein turnover goes down. If you give a 16-year-old a certain amount of protein, they will have very good response. You can give a same amount of protein to a 65-year-old and you may get 10% response at best or even no response at all. So for those who are on a plant-based diet, like a vegetarian diet, you may potentially face a decrease in both the quantity and the quality of the protein. So you know that you will need more protein, and that only means that you will have to ingest more calories to make up for it, which is another topic that I will talk about sometime later. But to summarize, this will be my take. We, each of us, should front load protein in a day. Okay, which means we would want to have at least 2 meals that are well above 30 grams of protein in each of that meal. We can even go for higher dose such as 40 to 45 grams for the first meal of the day and perhaps a 45 in the last meal. And if we are talking with people who are elderly and trying to maintain minimal muscle mass, I would focus on 2 meals with very high protein at least. And if we are referring to somebody who's trying to lose weight, focus on the 3 meals with high quality protein because we wouldn't want them to be hungry. For someone who's trying to build muscles or achieve muscle hypertrophy, aim for 4 meals with good quality protein. To conclude my series, I hope you will remember that protein is not and should not be a percentage of calories. Protein should be an absolute number, and there is a guideline. I will post the guideline in the description box on my YouTube channel for your reference. You will then need to decide on what your goals are and build your diet around it. And because protein requirement is an absolute number, if in the event your calories go down, your protein intake should remain the same. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the discussion on what we may not know but should know about protein. Please share with someone who may find this useful. And if you have not subscribed to my podcast, please do so now, and you will get notified each time a new episode is out. If you have an interest in any topics I have yet to discuss, let me know in the comment section below. I will see you in the next episode. Bye.